Well, thank you very much for staying with us. And as you can imagine, as you've seen on your screens, we're actually digging into matters with regard to the State of the Nation address. What is your State of the Nation? We'd love to hear from you. We're expecting in the course of the show to hear what you have to share. We've heard so many or seen so many comments already. But what do you think? This morning we get into the regions as well to find out what they have to share with us by way of expectations. But our guests to digest, this beat ahead of the delivery of the State of the Nation address at 1 p.m. today by Mr. President. We have Dr. Kwame Asah-Asante, political scientist with the University of Ghana. Dr. Ebo Turkson, also of the University of Ghana. He's an economist. We also have Edem Senanu, an anti-graft campaigner. And of course, we have Kofi Asare as well joining the conversation. He is Executive Director, Africa Education Watch. Gentlemen, a very good morning to all of you.
Good morning.
Great. So let's start from you, Dr. Asante. Let's start with you with regard to the political dynamics. I mean, this is something that ought to be delivered going as far back as former President Akufo. We've seen this delivered year in and year out. The last one we saw as far as the State of the Nation address is concerned was actually just this past January. I want us to feed into what Mr. President said the last time and come into the present, I should say. So for you, what would it be that you would be looking forward to seeing from the political standpoint being addressed today on the back of what was delivered the last time in January?
Good morning. And let me say that a program of this nature, we expect the president to give us an account of what has happened in the previous administration briefly, and then touch on every sector of the economy. I want to see the president touch on the economy itself. We want to see a situation, he will deal with the details of the economy, the GDP, agriculture, inflation, and what have you. Of course, the issue of pandemic is very, very important on the agenda that it needs to be touched upon. And then President should be able to throw a little light on how far we have come. And then having the recent ruling from the Supreme Court, it is important for the president to also touch on that issue, trying to bring everybody together, and then we move on as a state, because that is critical. When the court has spoken, it becomes binding. All of us must, come together and forge ahead. And of course, the security of this country, we want to know the state of it, and what is the plan of the government to strengthen the frontiers of the country's security so that we can have a peaceful society. Of course, issue of education, issue of health must be dealt with. And we want to have a little insight as to what is on the table for us in this administration, starting from this year. Of course, the issue of corruption, which is gradually becoming an albatross around our neck. We want to see how best these problems can be dealt with. We want to hear from the president his ideas on this, and how far he wants to take the country as far as this issue is concerned. Having said this, we expect to know all that the government intends to do within this 4-year mandate, starting from this year. What is it that the president intends to do? And we want to see a full, a touch on some of these important issues, so that we can have an inkling as to what we should expect from the president.
Right. I just want to take you back a notch. You spoke about the Supreme Court's ruling. Now, all the other matters you spoke of, the economy, health, education, we're going to dig into those matters. That's why we've assembled, all of you together. But the Supreme Court ruling and, the president's take on it, is that not a matter that has, been brought to a close that was dealt with on a certain front. Does the president need to extend this into the State of the Nation address?
You know, when you have such ruling, obviously the country is divided along the lines of those who are for the ruling and those who believe that it should have gone their way. But we believe that a little statement, informing everybody that, look, once the court speaks, that's the end. Let us move on, and that's it. It doesn't change anything. But it is important when you are looking at governance that some of these things, you have a way of handling it so that we move along with that. And that's what I'm talking about.
Is that to say you'd be disappointed if you didn't hear Mr. President rope that into the State of the Nation address today?
Oh, he can decide to, touch on it or not. But a very important thing is that we want to see his ideas. What is it that he has for us in terms of governance of this country? And strictly speaking, the issue we are talking about fits into it. If he's able to touch on it, fine. If not, still, we move on. Because at the end of the day, the Supreme Court has finally dealt with it, and we are moving on with it.
Before I move on to Dr. Abel Turkson, before I come to you, Doc, Dr. Asante, wrapping, at least for this portion, with this one. This is a constitutional duty, yes, but I ask, how relevant has this entire enterprise of delivering State of the Nation addresses been? Oftentimes we hear the delivery. Many people say this is not a true reflection of what we see on the ground. Is this not, so to speak, and I'm choosing my words carefully, a waste of all our time?
I don't think that is the case. If that is the case, nobody will be entertaining such a program in the national affairs. No, it's strictly an important exercise that we do from time to time. It gives us an idea about the focus and direction of the country as far as the governance is concerned. And it is important that we need to know from the president what he thinks about, what plans he has put on the table to address some of the lingering challenges that we have in our society. That's very, very critical. And that, yes, it's not a full program where he comes up with the details of what you want to do and all that. Those specifics will be dealt with at appropriate level. But at least we want to have a gist of what is under the sleeves of the president that he wants us to know as far as some of the governance indicators are concerned. And that is what we are talking about. It's an important exercise, and I don't think that it is a waste of anybody's time. It is very critical.
Dr. Abel Turkson, let me come to you now. We shall delve into the purely economic matters, but let me find out from you, especially ahead of today's SONA. What would be your expectations from where you sit?
Okay, thank you. I think that the government has clearly indicated in the last budgets, especially the one for the mid-year last year, that Ghana has to move on beyond the COVID. And so at that time, the Minister of Finance told us that Ghana was looking at the CARES of a Tampa program, and that was supposed to stabilize the economy because of the impact of the COVID. If you cast your mind back, when the 2020 budget was read in November 2019, Ghana was expecting to improve its performance because over the 3 years to 2019, we had inflation trending downwards. It was almost 7.9 when the COVID hit Ghana. Our growth was also increasing. And almost all the macro indicators that showed a stable economy, an economy that was ready to take off, were indicators that we had attained at that time. And then the COVID hit. So as of the last time that the media budget was read, the immediate focus of government was to see how to restore the economy because COVID had hit, businesses had closed down, challenges for revenue. Meanwhile, government had to intervene to support households and businesses and the health sector. So it meant that all our programs for 2020 had to be thrown off board. We'll see how we contain the COVID and then also go on to, one, revitalize and transform the economy by providing stimulus package to businesses, especially local enterprises. That was the vision of government last year. So the plan was that for the year end to December 2020, the first part of the program was going to see how to stabilize the economy, ensure food security, support business and workers, and so on and so forth. And we saw that happen. So now what we are expecting from government is a second phase, where we are expecting that under the revitalization and transformation, the government had clearly indicated that it was going to support commercial farming and attract the youth into agriculture. And then most importantly, to support Ghana's light manufacturing industry, agro-processing, and those that were producing food import substitution, the pharmaceuticals and textile and garments. So there are a whole lot of package that we're expecting for this year, which I expect when the budget is read on Friday, we'll have much more detail. But I'm very certain that the president will highlight some of these programs that they have on the drawing board to get the Ghana economy back to where it was before the pandemic hit. We did much more than we expected, even when we projected that the economy was going to grow at less than 1%, but we did better than that. So it meant that we were very modest in our expectations when the COVID hit Ghana. We outperformed our modesty, but now is the time for us to really move back to where we were at 2020 before COVID hit us in March. And we are expecting the government to give us much more details. Of course, on Friday, we'll get much more details about the precise economic plans for Ghana. But these are some of the things that we should expect the president to talk about. Apart from other issues relative to the energy sector and the challenges that we're having with transmission and distribution and so on and so forth. So this is what I expect the government and the president to talk about
All right.
at 1 p.m.
So we're setting the foundation for this conversation, and I just wanted all of you to express your initial thoughts with regard to what your expectations are. I'll give the next bite of the cherry to Edem Senanu, anti-graft campaigner. Edem, thank you for joining us this morning on the AM show.
Thank you for having me.
Good. So what would be your brief expectations as ordinary Ghanaians ahead of SONA 2021?
Honestly, when I was asked this question yesterday, that this is what you're looking at, I couldn't fathom what to say because specifically over the course of the last 4 years, the issues of anti-corruption and good governance appeared to have gradually disappeared from the table. So in 2016, prior to taking office in to the elections, I mean, it was so focused on anti-corruption and what the government would do. And riding on the back of that, we got the Akufo Addo government come into place. Over the course of the 4 years, gradually the main aspects of it, including the Office of the Special Prosecutor, increased funding to anti-corruption and anti-graft agencies. The increased funding did happen. I mean, there's a sense in which there was an incremental change in what they've been receiving, and some institutions received more timely than they had in the past. But by the end of the duration, the fight against corruption appears to have lost its foundations. And here we are, 2021. I cannot fathom what the president is going to say that will add to what had been said in the past. And we will just wait and see.
Is that to say, basically, and I put this question to Dr. Asa Asante, is this going to be an exercise in futility? If you're saying that you can't fathom what the president would say that would make any difference, then is this an exercise in futility?
I think it's an expression of our opinion. That is what he thinks about. But it's a very important exercise. It gives us an idea as to how we can gauge the conduct or the performance of the government as we move along. So for me, it's critical. We need to know, at least, however small or however insignificant that one will be, we want to know. Because at the end of the day, remember that we are going to put all this thing together and judge the government as to whether to renew the party's mandate for 2024. And that is key.
Adam, let me put it back to you. Would it make any difference today's SONA?
Well, it will. I mean, as Kwame has just pointed out, we always need indicators The reason why we're able to assess that things didn't work too well was because there were flagship things that had been said. There were other things that were going on already. We haven't seen much progress in those areas. It's in the same way where we would love to know, is there something different they intend to do? How are they going to, as it were, roll back the losses we have made over the years? And that will help us after the 4-year term to also do an assessment. So no, it's not an exercise in futility. Indeed, it's part of the statutory requirements of the president and the government. So they can't run away from it.
Kofi Asare, let me bring you in now. And I know your focal area is education, but education and beyond, what would you be looking forward to as far as today's SONA is concerned, briefly?
Well, morning to your audience, morning panelists and co-panelists. The SONA, I mean, this year's SONA obviously is the first one being delivered by His Excellency since he was sworn into his second term. During the electioneering campaign period, discussions about government policy intentions were captured within a context of a manifesto and promises in that manifesto. And so within the governance trajectory, it gets to the point where the winning party or candidates, enters government with their manifesto and its promises. And so this particular SONA is actually the first platform for making major policy statements that seek to move or transit from promises to policy. And so this is a very, very important one. In view of what has been promised in the manifesto, we all know that the process between promises and policy is not always smooth. There are some promises that actually don't see the light of day because it was difficult to actualize such promises. So the SONA provides a platform for a first major high-level or highest-level policy pronouncement on how the new government intends to migrate from promises in their manifesto to policy, which will obviously be the curtain raiser for a much detailed submission regarding particular, decisions that will be taken within this broad policy, areas in respect of the upcoming budget. So this is very important.
All right. With that hurdle cleared, let's now delve into the meat of the matter. And we're going to be addressing some of the what we heard from Mr. President just this past January in terms of a reflection of where we find ourselves as a country. I'll come to you, Dr. Ebo Turkson, on the economy. And we were told in 2020, our GDP growth projection was around 6.8%. It was revised to 0.9% and then later to 1.9%. But a far cry from what we expected as a nation, or at least in terms of our finances. Here we are faced with businesses that have collapsed. We are faced with rising unemployment. Some of these Bretton Woods institutions have told us that our economy is on a recovery course and that in the next 5 years we should see some benefits. But from where you sit ahead of today's SONA, where would you say we stand in terms of our finances? Is the picture as rosy as some of these institutions painted to be?
Okay, thank you. I don't think that we should be worried too much about our finances. Over the year, the government has done its best to try as much as possible to minimize the impact, the economic impact of the COVID on households and on businesses. And so if you take the fiscal space, you see that government has had to contend with very low levels of domestic resource mobilization, at the same time having to increase its expenditures beyond what was planned for 2020, so that we were expecting to have a budget deficit that had been planned for 4.7 for 2020 to a target of about over 11%. We were able to do slightly above 9%, but what it meant was that a lot of other things that government had planned to do in that year for us to continue with our recovery, which we have achieved over the last 3-4 years. After we went to the IMF for the support, we observed that these things didn't happen. Now, what you need as a country when the pandemic has hit and almost all your plans are off board is to try to see how you can stabilize the economy. And once that stability is achieved, then you can begin to revitalize the economy to the next level. So the Curse of Antapa project that the government announced was a plan that was going to get Ghana out of this mess as soon as possible, maybe 2024, in the first 6 months, trying to stabilize the economy, which to some extent we were able to achieve. But from January up to the end of 2023, we are expecting to revitalize the economy. And this is what the plan of government, as was announced, was. Their main intention was to support local businesses. And the idea that government had at that time, which I believe is what the president and then the minister of finance will talk about, was to see how best we could support commercial farming in Ghana so that we can assure ourselves of food security. So government flagship programs like the Planting for Food and Jobs, Rain for Food and Jobs initiatives were going to be given the needed support for the initiative to target the youth. So that while some had lost jobs, agriculture should now be an alternative, and commercial farming, not just going into the normal things that we used to do, but move our farming to a level where the younger generation was going to get interested in commercial farming, and then replace our aging farmers to produce for us. And because we are looking at agro-processing industrialization, and if we don't get the agricultural sector to support that industrialization drive, we'll set up the factories like we are doing the 1F, but there'll be no agricultural output support. So the government's intention was to use agriculture to support our light manufacturing industry that we're envisaging to get off this year. So the 1F has been very instrumental. Over 60% of the factories or the initiatives that have been carried out under the 1F are into agro-processing. So that you see a government that is trying to look at the value chain in agriculture and trying to set up the industrial sector to provide the needed support to agriculture, and then move along the value chain, not only to produce for domestic consumption or import substitutes, but even to export. So the government had plans as of mid last year to get our economy, and I think that those plans are still there as to continue. Apart from that, it was also looking at developing the digital economy in this country to ensure that now we are going to build the capacities of our manufacturing sector to be able to produce machine tools to support our industrialization, and then also to fast track our digitization, and then most importantly, to make Ghana a hub for the after, and then also for financial services, so that Ghana was being positioned within the sub-region to attract investments into our economy, one, to set up the International Financial Services Center, and then also to make sure that the Secretariat of After that is in Ghana, we maximize the maximum benefit that we can get
right
for having the Secretariat here, to attract a lot of conferences and all of that, and to do some sort of reforms at our ports and trade logistics so that we could also be the country along the coast with the highest number of landlocked countries, use Ghana as a transit for exports into the landlocked countries. So quite clearly, the government has a plan on how to revitalize our economy. So what we are expecting to hear today will be the vision, which ties in with the Ghana Beyond Aid. And then also on Friday, what the precise plans are for the year 2021 and beyond.
Now,
yes,
speaking...
our debt to GDP ratio has increased, but we shouldn't get so much worried about it because we had to stabilize the economy. Households had to be supported. Businesses had to be supported. Those who had lost jobs had to be supported in terms of certain basic utilities that had to be paid for. So if that is the reason why our debt to GDP ratio has hit almost 75%, whilst it might call for concern, I don't think we need to worry too much because the last year was not a year that you could call a normal year. All over the world, governments were supporting. So we shouldn't get too much worried, but focus on how soon we recover our economy back to where it was.
Okay, Doc, let me come in at this point. And this bit about revitalizing the economy that you speak of, you just started on something else that I'd wanted to get into, which is unemployment. It's a raging issue in this country, especially among the youth, on the back of the banking sector collapse, whose ripple effects we are still feeling. Then, before even the pandemic came through, we've been told in different instances that 2 million jobs, 3 million jobs have been created by this administration. But we also know that there are a lot of people who have lost their jobs within these last few years. And that has affected people's businesses. That has affected people's livelihoods. What would you say would be your expectations in today's SONA to address this critical issue of unemployment and many Ghanaians who are out of work? Briefly, sir.
Yeah, if you remember, in 2020, the vision was to support some local enterprises to build that culture of having Ghanaians there to become owners of enterprises that were going to outlive their generation. The government had clearly indicated that it was going to give support to have the youth there into manufacturing. And so that was on board. If you look at the CARES of Atampa program, when you go, and I refer to this because it is going to drive our economic policy for the next 4 years. And if you look at the content of that document, you clearly see a government that has a passion to support local enterprises so that they move into sectors that depend so much on labor-intensive production. I think the expectation of government is that if this is successful, then the youth that are unemployed are going to get jobs. If you're able to attract, like we've done for the automobile industry, attract those major multinational companies into our economy, they are going to assure jobs. We'll get our youth to be employed. And what is even critical for us now out there in the global economy is our free SHS system. Now, if that is successful, it shows clearly an economy that has a labor force that is quite skilled. And that is one of the main attractions when multinationals are moving into a particular economy, because not only do we have the skilled labor force, but our labor, the wages here are relatively lower. So high skilled, low wage economy is an attraction for foreign direct investment. So based on the plans under the CARES of Atampa program, there are very good initiatives that should be able to generate enough employment to get our youth into good jobs. Don't forget that the digitization economy is also at the center of this program, and the youth can take advantage of that to also create their own jobs for themselves, because the services sector has now brought up new potential in the sense that now delivery and making use of the digital platform is another opportunity for the youth to be able to generate jobs for themselves. So this is a whole program that if we complete the program like we expect, by the end of 2023, I think that we should be able to get jobs for most of our youth. And then we continue with our medium-term plan of looking beyond aid. So the pandemic will by all means mean that we should not expect a full recovery as soon as possible, but hopefully in 2 to 3 years. And that will also depend on how soon we attain herd immunity, as we have at least 70% of our population that are immunized. If we are able to do that, then we can return to business as usual, and then our economy recover very fast.
Let me come to Kofi Asare at this point in time. And mention has been made of free SHS, so it's easy to segue into this belt of the discussion. Looking at the dynamics when it comes to our educational setup, at least it is one of the foremost policies of this administration that everybody is talking about. Good policy, as most have said, but let's talk about cost. Let's talk about sustainability in these times of a pandemic. What are the dynamics you see? Because the implementation has been questioned, the cost factor has been brought to bear, sustainability issues as well. What would be your expectations in today's SONA in respect of that? What do you want to hear? What do you want to see?
Well, I heard Doc mention that, yes, with free senior high schools ties into the human capital agenda, so that we will have the opportunity of participating more actively in the Continental Free Trade Agreement by making sure that we have the right caliber of people. When he said that, I was wondering, because you see, the free senior high school, so far as I'm concerned, is a social intervention. We haven't positioned it properly to be the hub of our human capital development, especially at the pre-university level. Because if you talk about human capital availability, as we speak, 90% of graduates every year, struggle to get jobs. And so we are producing more than we even need. We are struggling to find a place for them. So the free senior high school providing, human capital for the Continental Free Trade Agreement, I don't see that. What I see is that we have an opportunity to position the free senior high school and make it more productive, production-oriented or technical-oriented. Instead of running a free senior high school that only 6% of students are TVET students, are actually pursuing programs that give them the skill required to make them more productive and participate in the production aspect of trade within the Continental Free Trade Agreement. We have to focus more on ensuring that we move our free senior high school system to the level where it becomes relevant to job placement and also job creation, not necessarily a social intervention that enhances access for what? In Europe, they are doing between 45 and 50% secondary to TVET ratio. Almost about half of all second cycle students are doing TVET. So when you complete school, the connection between skills training, job placement, entrepreneurship is there, because there are intervening policies to support people going to incubation, startups and all that, and then those who have to be employed too. There's a system that ensures that the skills that is acquired at the secondary level is a relevant skill tied to industry's demand. And so it makes employment much easier. Over here, only 6%, apart from the fact that only 6% of our secondary school students are pursuing TVET. We don't even have adequate places in our TVET institutions. And so we haven't, done enough to make TVET the priority, of our human capital development agenda beyond the beautiful speeches we experienced in the past decade. I think this is an opportunity for us to actualize the TVET theory, and then move ahead. There's His Excellency promise in the manifesto that the free TVET is going to come on board. Fine, but we need to work hard. We need to expand access to free TVET. We are still doing 1.3% of the education budget on TVET, which is woefully inadequate. It's the smallest after special education and non-formal. And so it doesn't walk the talk of making TVET the hub of our secondary education. So we expect the president to make pronouncement that suggests that government is going to expand access by expanding physical infrastructure, improving facilities in TVET centers, strengthening faculty capacity, and also strengthening the deployment of competency-based, relevant skills training programs in these TVET institutions, so that within the next 4 years of this administration, we would have moved the secondary to TVET ratio from 6% to probably 20%, assuring us that, out of the 70% or 65% of students that do not get opportunity of transiting from secondary to tertiary, at least they would have had something tangible to start a business or to find employment within industry. Apart from the free TVET being, for me, the most important the most important dimension of the free senior high school I want to hear. We are also interested in hearing pronouncement that suggest that the focus of infrastructural development is moving from second cycle to basic. In the past 4 years, we saw less than 150 basic schools being built against over 1,500 promised in successive budgets in the past 4 years. Obviously, we know that the 1.5 billion securitized loan government secured, which was meant to enhance infrastructure in the sector, went to the expansion of infrastructure in senior high schools because of the double track system. Thankfully, the double track system has come to an end, we are told. And it means that it is time for us to shift focus on now expanding basic school infrastructure, renovating dilapidated school infrastructure. We need to look at building schools in schools where schooling takes place under trees. There are so many of such schools. And as COVID remains with us, even after vaccination and all that, we are told that we have about 2 years more to go with COVID. We need to take a careful look about, and not just about COVID, but then pandemic and post-pandemic recovery processes. We need to look at how we are situating our educational system to respond to this pandemic and future pandemics. And so I am expecting the president to make major pronouncement on his plans to expand access to virtual learning opportunities, to strengthen virtual learning systems and technologies, and then equip the teaching force with virtual learning instructional systems and assessments, instructional skills and assessment skills, so that as we are used to the fact that every 10 years there's a major pandemic, irrespective of the dimension of the next dimension the next pandemic takes, Ghana will be able to manage and navigate its cooling system within the pandemic without necessarily having to throw overboard an academic year for 10 months. One other issue I'm looking at is in the area of teachers. We saw lots of reform taking place in the teaching sector. We are expecting a continuation of those reforms to the extent, to the level that our teaching is going to be made more accountable. We want to see a more results-based teaching profession where people are promoted based on their output and the quality of the outcomes they produce, and not necessarily based on the number of years they spend teaching and all that. And so we want to see interventions that were started in the past 4 years relating to secondary school teachers having KPIs, which was fantastic, but was never enforced, to now being enforced. We want to see KPIs being enforced in secondary schools, and we want to see KPIs being introduced into basic schools so that teachers will be more accountable to the taxpayer and the government.
All right, Kofi, thank you very much. Let me come now to Edem Senanu. And interestingly, Edem, from some of the remarks we've seen on social media, in fact, even this very morning, the Daily Graphic, ahead of SONA 2021, has been speaking to ordinary Ghanaians about their expectations when it comes to the fight against corruption and the perception of corruption in this country. A lot of people concerned, and some young people throwing in the towel and saying the fight has been lost and that they don't see how we can that basically we're on the ropes when it comes to corruption, that it's beating us black and blue. So the question is, has the fight indeed been lost? What can be done to remedy the situation? You've been at the forefront recently talking about the Auditor General and all of that. What is it that can be done? What do you expect to hear from Mr. President today on that front?
Well, I believe that what you've heard from the citizenry is a reflection of how we feel in the sector. And perhaps that's why my first response was, I can't fathom. I'm sure if you had asked me what would I like to hear, I could have answered, but I think for most of us, our expectations have been dashed based on where we started. Let me put on record that in the recent manifesto, the NPP talked about a number of things which potentially could reflect there. They talked about resourcing the RTI Commission to operationalize the right to information law that was there. They talked about, again, increased funding to the anti-corruption agencies. They talked about limiting the size of government, and you can see that some effort has already been put there. I think we've come down from 135 or so to 80-something in terms of the projections. But I think that where we have had the greatest difficulty is the disconnect between the commitments and then the support for those institutions. So, for example, we had expected a lot more support for the Auditor General, for the Office of Special Prosecutor, a lot more work done when the scandals came up to come to the conclusion and hold people accountable, and a lot of that didn't happen. Now, moving forward, a few things would make a difference. I don't know whether anyone keeps track of the president's policy statements and tries to help him keep on track, keep on top, and ensure that execution happens. That would be very helpful. Because I think part of our disconnect is we feel like, well, when the president says that don't just be observers, don't be spectators, but be citizens, and people are trying to be citizens and they're not getting the support, we get worried about that. So a lot more connection between the policy statements and what is executed will make a difference. I think that some fundamental things that will help. One, for example, we need to review the Constitution. There are various aspects of the Constitution that grant the executive excessive power, and we see that influence and interference in other branches of government, which is not auguring well for anti-corruption. Okay. Again, clear funding mechanism for the National Anti-Corruption Action Plan. That's been long in coming because we have a National Anti-Corruption Action Plan. It doesn't have any direct sourcing of funds, and so it's all over the place. We don't see much traction on it. Again, the issue of KPIs, and I realize my brother in education talks about it. We are clear in our minds that without a sector-by-sector system to have KPIs where we are tracking what each minister and the sector are doing on a regular basis, which is something that happens in East Africa. In Kenya, for example, they have an electronic dashboard with the KPIs for every sector established. And so you can see when the ministers are making progress, the sectors are making progress or not. We need that at the highest level. Because as it is, there isn't a clear way of measuring whether we're making progress or not. And including those KPIs would be issues of anti-graft as well. So those are some of the thoughts. To get the fight back, would need some radical changes, starting from the Constitution, moving on to the president, making sure that between what he says and what is done, we are seeing that traction so that people have a lot more confidence.
All right. I'll be returning to you, gentlemen, and when I return, I'll be interacting with Dr. Asa Asante. But before we get into that, we have some expectations of people like you out there from the Ashanti and Western regions who also share their thinking or their thoughts, their expectations ahead of SONA 2021. Let's check out what some of them actually had to share.
For me, I have a lot of expectations that I want the president to address. But my most pressing expectation is about corruption. What do we see nowadays? What the previous government was doing, they are doing even more than what they were doing. What do we see? We are all witnesses to what's going on in this country. So I want him to address or say something about corruption and how he's going about the solutions on how he's going to curb corruption in his ministries. So corruption is my most pressing expectation. You see, so corruption is my most pressing expectation. You see, after the elections, there is no money. The amount of money inflow in the country is very low. So I want him to put things in place, proper things in place, so that the inflow of money in the country will be more, as we are seeing now. Things are very hard. After the election, we don't see anything going on. But during the time when we were about to do the election, we saw a lot of developmental projects. But what do we see now? We see nothing.
I want to see policies to the health sector and then the financial sector. That's the business aspect of the economy. Corruption is not a major issue. If we have basic amenities done for the Ghanaian people, I don't think a lot of Ghanaians will be focusing their attention on corruption. But it's because we are not getting our needed basic amenities. That is why when you hear little things about corruption, it's like the whole economy is a corrupt economy.
The State of the Nation address always come at ease, and then my expectation for tomorrow's State of Nation address, I think that the president or the ministers will champion more on the transport system, as it just recently happened on Kumasi to Accra route. About 50 souls were lost. So we don't have to concentrate or give Corona much more attention as it is, getting up to. We have to also, so tomorrow my expectation is actually looking forward to hit on our roads and reconstruction of some of our roads. Well, as a developing country, I don't think we are in need of many policies as well, and we are now developing, so I don't really know, but infrastructure is also a very key point that the president and its government should also look onto, because I think this pre-SHS, for instance, has helped a lot of students and as a Ghanaian as a whole, but yes, still we need more room for improvement. So I think the infrastructure is way forward to go now. Corruption has been a major key factor to the revitalization of African development as well. But I would say Ghanaian, as for instance, we don't hate corruption that much. We actually hate corruption when it's not in our possession. So corruption as it stands has become Ghanaian part of us, but it's also a major issue which is retiring our development. So corruption, he said that he will come and uproot the behavior or the character of corruption in Ghanaians, but I don't think he has able to fought well. And so as the Galamsey issues, so I'm looking forward that he should also address the Galamsey issues as well, because most of the water bodies are also still contaminating, and it's really bad.
The nation to the higher level. Thank you. Corruption is a problem. For corruption, oh, may he rest in peace. J.J. Rawlings never liked any corruption, and he has been hammering on it every day and every night. Corruption, he has to look into corruption. Things are happening under his watch, even in his own office. So many places, everywhere you go, there's corruption. So he has to really see into the corruption matter, because it's corruption that is killing the nation. It's corruption that is taking all our money away. So the corruption, he has to bring watchdog people to watch the ministers and the MPs, so that everybody will do his work. There should be accountability. When you work, you have to account for it, so that the nation is going to move forward. This is what I'm looking up to.
Okay, I really want him to continue the free SHS program, because it's really helping a lot. And then he should continue with the construction of one district, one factory. Most of the regions haven't gotten this, or the districts haven't gotten their factory, but I want him to continue from where he ended in his previous term. Okay, I expect the president to address the Western region on when we are getting the vaccines, especially the frontline workers, when they are going to be vaccinated to prevent the spread of the COVID-19 virus. And then I expect him to talk about the PTC interchange, when it will be completed. Then secondly, roads that he cuts towards for. I want to know when construction will start. And then I heard I've heard a lot of ministers talk about the Fiancanta Regional Hospital. I want to know when it will be upgraded to reach the standard of a regional hospital.
So there you have it, from the Ashanti and Western regions, ordinary Ghanaians sharing their thoughts, their expectations ahead of today's SONA. Let me come now to Dr. Asa Asante. You have some interest in governance and policy-related issues. When you look at the policies of this administration in the last 4 years, and now another tenure of 4 years being added, what would you say are those specific policies that you feel should be retained, should be carried forward, and those policies that you feel should be let go of, that should be jettisoned, so to speak? Doc, and you would have to unmute, please. We can't hear you, so you would have to unmute and restart with your submission.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm saying that, strictly speaking, you have a lot to touch on. The time will not permit us to go through, but I'll touch on a few of this. If you look at the policy on education, you realize that it's a good one, except that there are problems that government, I believe, that they have taken political notice of and addressing head on. They should do that very fast and let us see the benefits of the policy in no time. Because you see, one problem with the policy is that if you delay a lot and you are not able to inject all the energies that we need, at the end of the day, people believe that it's just an empty talk. The government need to walk the talk regarding the educational policy we are looking at. If you look at the issue about governance in general, listening to ordinary people, they talk about the issue of corruption. And it gives you a sense of what they are feeling and what the thing is about. Government policy on how to fight corruption has been so slow. I believe that we need more energy. We need more, things to build the institution with all the support that they need. Remember, as people are talking about the corruption and corruption-related issues, you are losing the fight in the area of good governance, where it ties in there, where you need to strengthen the institution, anti-corruption institution, give them the necessary resources. But of course, you need a political will. The government must demonstrate beyond reasonable doubt that it's ready to fight corruption head on. And that is the starting point. And of course, you follow up with funding, you follow up with institutions, anti-corruption institutions, strengthen them. That takes us to another, branch of the good governance agenda, where accountability must be more upheld this time around, because you can never talk on anything about good governance without proper articulation and demonstration of the tenets of what a good governance regarding issue of accountability. Let us have the opportunity to hold our leaders answerable for the actions and inactions, because that holds the key to good governance. Of course, we need to talk about the issue of transparency. I mean, you cannot fight corruption when issue of transparency doesn't come in. We need to have easy access to information. We need to, deal with issues that confront us head on. And of course, we need to have all, budgets and all audited reports made available to people for them to assess and know what is happening. And that also takes us to improved public sector performance. This area, we need to cut expenditure of government. Government expenditure tends to be very huge. I'm happy government has taken steps to reduce the size of government, which is part of the good governance agenda. And we need to strengthen that if we really want to make a case in the area of governance.
Thank you very much, Doc. The rest of you gentlemen, I'll give you a minute each, and it's a wrap. On the same, subject, policies, programs, what should go, what should be retained as we move into this next phase of our national life? I'll start with you, Mr. Asare.
Yeah, I think for education, as I mentioned, the free senior high school still remains a flagship, but the discussion will have to move, the focus of government will have to move from the free senior high school being a social intervention where everybody has the right to go to secondary school, to the point where we begin to connect the outcome of the free senior high school education to job creation. bearing in mind that only 30% of pre-senior school graduates will get to tertiary. And so we need to begin to implement policies that will connect the free senior high school to job creation. And that is where we'll begin to prioritize TVETs in this sense. And so that is, for me, the issue about the whole the agenda for the next 4 years, using the free senior high school to resolve our job creation and youth unemployment.
Is there anything you would like to see go as far as the educational sector is concerned? Anything you think this government should get rid of?
Well, we have advised this government over and over that the payment of about 150 million every year to teacher trainees is a waste of resources because there's already demand for teacher training. There's a virtual assurance of placement after training. And so why do you have to pay someone to go to school? Why are doctors not paid to go to school? Why are laboratory technicians not paid to go to school? And why are ordinary students not ordinary students, why are students pursuing humanities not paid to go to school, even though they will complete school and there is no readily available job for them? Why are you rather paying those that have ready jobs waiting for them after school? And so the whole issue of incentivizing teacher training must be looked at, because the demand for teacher training is now over 150,000 a year.
Right.
And only about 25 to 30,000 are going to get places in the training institutions. And so there's a huge demand for teacher training. And it makes no sense economically to incentivize the demand which you are not even able to manage properly. So that we can divert those resources to other areas in the education sector that require urgent resourcing, including infrastructure development at the basic level.
Point well made. Let me come to Dr. Ebo Turkson. In a minute, what would you say, economically speaking and beyond, should be retained, should be pursued, or should be let go of as far as SONA is concerned and our national life moving forward?
Yeah, I believe that the government should continue its efforts to expand or widen our tax nets. We need to do much more for domestic resource mobilization. It will be very appropriate if government supports the Ghana revenue agencies to be well equipped to collect more tax revenue, because that is what we need to fund our development if we need to look beyond aid. I should also think that government should look at its expenditure profile very well. I have always said that in terms of the funding for the free SHS, parents who can afford should be made to pay for the awards fees, so that there is some freeing up of resources in that sector to go into capital expenditure, especially in the provision of infrastructure in our economy. Last year was supposed to be a year of roads. Because of the COVID, we didn't get too much of that. It's important that we put our domestic infrastructure in place. It's critical, so that we will be able to attract enough investments to provide the jobs that we need for our teaming youth. And then finally, I think that the government should also hasten its processes of trying to improve the business environment, so that our domestic firms would be able to reduce the cost of doing business, so that they become competitive in the multilateral trading system. Also, to ensure that we give support to our domestic firms, so that they recover quickly from the COVID, so that people return to their jobs, businesses will come back, and then the economy will be able to move ahead, so that we recover what we lost over the last year due to the COVID.
Adam Senanu, you'll have the last bite on this, and it's wrap. So in about a minute or slightly more, what would you say? You have just said on the show that you feel the fight against corruption has lost its foundation. What should stay? What should go? What should be implemented to ensure that we revamp that fight?
Well, thank you very much. Would like to see something on political party financing. I mean, it's a major aspect where we find that when we balloon our expenses during that period, afterwards we have to deal with it. So political party financing. We need to review our assets declaration regime. The current state is not fit for purpose. It doesn't allow us to track what is going on there. The question about the election of MMDCEs, it may have fallen into some contention, but it's an issue we need to come back to and try and address once and for all to make sure that the various districts, etc., are responsive to the needs of the people there. The resourcing of the commission on information so that the right to information actually is operationalized. That must definitely happen. The KPIs issue, in terms of good governance, I think that we're not going to make any headway if we keep just shifting players here and there, and we don't have a very systematic way of keeping track. Are they performing or not? And the shorter the periods within which we're reviewing it, the better for all of us. And finally, the issue of the Constitution. That is the number one issue if addressed, because there are various aspects that no longer are in sync with the development and growth of this nation. As Ghanaians, we need to come and look at that Constitution. Let's review it, the many aspects that no longer give us the kind of results we want. And then we can hopefully see some real traction in this next 4 years. Thank you very much.
And thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. Dr. Ebu Turkson, economist at the University of Ghana. Kwame Asah-Asante, political scientist with the University of Ghana. Edem Senanu, anti-graft campaigner, and Kofi Asare, who is with Africa Education Watch as the executive director. Thank you so much for joining us for this leg of the conversation. But there's more to come on the AM show.